Alexander the Great is the only ancient commander still taught at West Point, Sandhurst, and every major military academy on Earth today. Not as history, as tactics. The oblique attack he used at Gaugamela in 331 BC is still in the U.S. Army's field manual. The hammer and anvil, phalanx pins the center, companion cavalry destroys the flank, is the conceptual foundation of combined arms warfare that the U.S. military uses today with tanks and infantry instead of horses and sarissas. Every military in this series has faced the U.S. military and adapted in real time. Genghis Khan invented targeting enemy logistics. The Roman general built a circumvallation in 6 hours. Ivar the Boneless conducted strategic reconnaissance against a carrier group. Ramesses II drove his golden chariot alone toward Apache helicopters. Each one was extraordinary. None of them studied at West Point. Alexander the Great did not study at West Point either. West Point studied him, and now a U.S. Army Airborne brigade has been transported to the Persian plains in 331 BC, the eve of the Battle of Gaugamela, the moment Alexander commands the most tactically refined army in the ancient world, at the peak of his military genius. 4,000 paratroopers against 47,000 Macedonian warriors led by the one ancient commander who already knows everything the U.S. military is going to do before they do it, because he invented it. The U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division Brigade transported to the Persian plains in 331 BC consists of 4 no paratroopers, 3 infantry battalions, a fires battalion with M777 howitzers, and a combat aviation brigade with 18 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters and 12 UH-60 Black Hawk utility helicopters. Each paratrooper carries an M4 carbine, body armor, night vision, and 210 rounds of ammunition. The brigade has 24 M198 howitzers, javelin anti-armor missiles, and a drone surveillance element providing continuous battlefield coverage. Alexander's Macedonian army at Gaugamela consists of approximately 47,000 soldiers, 9,000 Macedonian phalanx infantry armed with the sarissa, an 18-foot pike that creates a wall of iron points 5, ranks deep that nothing in the ancient world can penetrate from the front 5, Zeusan companion cavalry personally loyal to Alexander and trained to execute the decisive flank charge with a precision that no cavalry force in history has matched, and a supporting cast of Cretan archers, Thracian light infantry, and Agrianian javelineers that gives the Macedonian army more combined arms flexibility than any force it has ever faced. Alexander commands from the front, always the right flank, always with the companion cavalry, always at the point of decision. He has never lost a battle. He is 25 years old. Alexander the Great receives his first scout report of the American brigade at dawn, and his reaction is unlike any commander in the series. He does not call a council. He does not send more scouts. He sits alone in his command tent for 22 minutes and thinks. His chief of staff, Hephaestion, his closest friend and most trusted officer, waits outside. The generals wait outside. The entire Macedonian army waits while Alexander sits alone and thinks. What comes out of the tent 22 minutes later is not a set of orders. It is a question. Alexander emerges and asks his engineers, the flying machines, what do they need to keep flying? The engineers, who have been interrogating captured scouts, say, "We don't know." Alexander says, "Find out." He asks his cavalry commanders, "At what distance do the thunder weapons become inaccurate?" The cavalry commanders say, "We don't know." Alexander says, "Find out." He asks his intelligence officers, "Where does their commander position himself during battle?" The officers say, "At the rear, behind the main force." Alexander says, "That is the first difference between us." He goes back into his tent. He has identified the central asymmetry of the entire engagement in 22 minutes. U.S. commanders command from the rear. Alexander commands from the front. One of those approaches is safer. The other one wins battles. He has built his entire military career on the second one, and he is not changing it now. The American brigade establishes its position on the edge of the Persian plain at dawn, the same flat, open terrain that Alexander specifically chose for Gaugamela, because the Macedonian phalanx performs best on flat ground with clear fields of movement. The irony is not lost on the brigade commander, a colonel from the 82nd Airborne who has studied Alexander's campaigns at West Point. that Alexander has chosen the terrain that also gives the American artillery its clearest fields of fire. The RQ-7 Shadow drones are airborne at 0500, providing continuous surveillance of the Macedonian position 4 kilometers away. The drone feed shows something that immediately distinguishes Alexander's army from every previous ancient force in the series. The Macedonian army is not massing for a frontal charge. It is not sending cavalry screens forward to probe. It is not building a fortified camp. It is deploying, carefully, methodically, in the exact tactical formation the brigade commander studied in his West Point classroom 15 years ago. Phalanx in the center, companion cavalry on the right, Thessalian cavalry on the left, light infantry on the oblique flanks. The brigade commander looks at the drone feed for 3 minutes. Then he says to his S2 intelligence officer, he's deploying in his Gaugamela formation. His S2 says, yes, sir. The commander says, he knows we've studied him. His S2 says, sir, I think he's counting on it. Alexander makes the first move at 0700, and it is not the move any American war game predicted. He does not advance the phalanx. He does not send the companion cavalry forward. He sends one man, a single rider, unarmed, carrying an olive branch, moving at a walk toward the American perimeter. The brigade commander watches on drone feed. He says to his XO, is that a parley? His XO says, in 331 BC, an olive branch is a parley, yes, sir. The commander says, what does he want? His XO says, we won't know until we talk to him. The commander sends his own unarmed officer forward. The two men meet in the middle of the Persian plain between the two armies, a U.S. Army captive and a Macedonian herald, separated by 2,300 years of military history and 200 meters of flat ground. The message the herald delivers, translated through the brigade's historical linguistics team, is 5 sentences. It says, Alexander, King of Macedon, Lord of Asia, greets the commander of the force from the future. He has studied your tactics from the information provided by captured scouts. He proposes a different engagement than the one you are preparing for. He wants to meet alone, in the middle of the plain, before any battle begins. He says, tell your commander I know he has studied me. Tell him I want to study him back. The brigade commander accepts. His security team argues against it for 11 minutes. He overrules them. He drives forward in a single unarmored vehicle with one interpreter and stops in the center of the plain. Alexander rides forward alone on Bucephalus, his famous black warhorse, the horse he has ridden into every battle since he was 16 years old, and stops 10 meters away. The two men look at each other for a long moment. Alexander speaks first in Greek through the interpreter chain. He says, you are younger than I expected. The brigade commander is 42. He says, you are younger than I expected too. Alexander is 25. Alexander says, I am told your army has weapons that kill at great distance with thunder. The commander says, yes. Alexander says, I am told your flying machines can destroy my cavalry from heights my archers cannot reach. The commander says, yes. Alexander says, I am told you command from the rear, behind the main force, using communication devices that transmit information instantly across the battlefield. The commander says, yes. Alexander looks at him. He says, then you have solved the problem of information. You always know what is happening everywhere simultaneously. The commander says, that's correct. Alexander says, that is the one thing I have spent my entire career trying to solve with messengers and signal fires. He pauses. He says, how does it feel? The commander says, like having eyes everywhere. Alexander says, yes, that is what I thought it would feel like. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, it doesn't tell you what to do with what you see. The commander says, no, it doesn't. Alexander says, that is where the general still matters. The commander says, yes. Alexander says for the first time. He says, good, then we are not so different. The battle begins at noon, not because the talking ends, but because Alexander ends it. He says to the brigade commander, I have learned what I came to learn. Now I need to know one more thing. The commander says, what? Alexander says, whether what I learned is enough. He turns Bucephalus and rides back to his line. The brigade commander drives back to his position. Both forces know what is coming. The Macedonian phalanx advances at 1200 hours in the oblique formation Alexander used at Gaugamela, the right flank leading, the phalanx angled to draw the American line rightward, while the companion cavalry prepares the decisive left hook that has won every battle Alexander has ever fought. The brigade commander has studied the exact maneuver in his West Point classroom. He has wargamed it. He knows it is coming. His counter is textbook. Apache helicopters engage the companion cavalry on the right flank before they can execute the hook. M77 howitzers suppress the phalanx advance with precision fire. Javelin teams engage any armored element that closes to 2,000 meters. It is the correct counter to Alexander's formation. It is based on 15 years of studying Alexander's tactics. Alexander has been studying the American counter for 3 hours. He has already adjusted for it. What Alexander has done in the 2 hours since the plain meeting is the most remarkable tactical adaptation in the series. He has identified that the American Apaches will target his companion cavalry first, because that is the decisive element of his formation, and any competent opponent targets the decisive element first. His adjustment is to make the companion cavalry the decoy. He sends the Thessalian cavalry, normally his left flank holding force, on the decisive right hook instead, keeping the companion cavalry visible and threatening on the right to draw the Apache engagement, while the Thessalians execute the actual flanking maneuver on the left. He has, in 2 hours, identified the American targeting priority, deduced that it will focus on the companion cavalry, and restructured his entire battle plan around deceiving that targeting priority. The brigade commander watching on drone feed sees the Macedonian formation shift at the last moment and says to his echo, "He switched it." His echo says, "Switched what?" The commander says, "The Thessalians are the hammer. The companions are the feint." His XO says, "How did he know we'd go for the companions first?" The commander says, "Because that's what he would do. And he studied us well enough to know we studied him well enough to do exactly what he would do." His XO is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "Sir, that is the most complicated sentence I have heard in 20 years of military service." The commander says, "Welcome to fighting Alexander the Great." The engagement on the Persian plain produces the most tactically complex result in the series. The American howitzers suppress the phalanx advance. The Sarissa wall stops at 800 meters under artillery fire and cannot close to effective range. The Apaches engage the companion cavalry feint and neutralize it as a fighting force within 4 minutes. But the Thessalian cavalry executes the flanking maneuver on the left with the precision of 10 years of Macedonian cavalry training and reaches the American left flank before the redirected Apaches can reposition. The Thessalian charge hits the American left flank battalion and forces it back 400 meters. The first ground given up by any American force in any engagement in the series, not a collapse, not a rout, a tactical withdrawal in good order under pressure from cavalry that should not have gotten close enough to apply pressure at all. Alexander, watching from his position with the companion cavalry, sees the Thessalian success and immediately exploits it, leading the companions through the gap created by the Thessalian pressure on the left before the Apaches can reposition to cover it. For approximately 11 minutes, the American left flank is under simultaneous cavalry pressure from 2 directions, and the brigade's tactical coherence is under genuine stress. Then the Apaches reposition, then the howitzers shift fires, then the moment passes, but it happened. Alexander found the gap, in real time, under fire, against the most advanced military force in history. He found the gap. The engagement ends at nightfall with the American position intact, the Macedonian phalanx unable to close to effective range, and Alexander's cavalry forces reduced to approximately 60% combat effectiveness by Apache engagement. By every conventional military measure, it is an American victory. Alexander calls his commanders together that night and delivers his assessment. It is the most honest after-action review in the ancient world. He says, "We found one gap. We held it for 11 minutes. Then we lost it." He says, "Their flying machines reposition faster than any cavalry force I have ever commanded. Their thunderweapons hit targets I cannot see from positions I cannot reach. Their information system means their commander knew about the Thessalian switch before the Thessalians completed it." He pauses. He says, "We cannot win this battle the way we fight battles." His generals wait, he says, "But we found the gap, and a gap that existed for 11 minutes can be made to exist for longer." He looks at it, he says, What did we learn today? His generals begin listing tactical observations. Alexander stops them after the third one. He says, "We learned that they study us more than they study themselves. That is their weakness. They know every move I have made in every battle I have ever fought. They have prepared for all of it." He pauses. He says, "So tomorrow I do something I have never done before." On day 3, Alexander abandons the Macedonian phalanx entirely. He sends it to the rear. He advances with cavalry only, all cavalry, both Companion and Thessalian, in a single massed formation, directly toward the American position at full gallop. No phalanx, no oblique, no hammer and anvil, no feint. Just 5 zeros and cavalry in a straight line charging at full speed toward a brigade of American paratroopers. It is, by every tactical principle Alexander has ever followed, the wrong move. It exposes his cavalry to concentrated fires without the phalanx to fix the American infantry. It abandons the combined arms doctrine that has made him undefeated for 10 years. It is exactly the kind of move his opponents, who have studied him exhaustively, have never prepared for, because he has never done it. The brigade commander watching on drone feed says, "What is he doing?" His S2 says, "Sir, I don't know. This isn't in any of his battles." The commander says that's the point. He looks at the charging cavalry, 5,000 horses at full gallop, 3 kilometers in closing, 2 minutes to effective weapons range. He says, "All fires. Everything now." The Apaches engage, the howitzers fire, the javelins launch, the M4s open up at 500 meters. The cavalry charge absorbs everything the brigade has and keeps coming because 5,000 horses at full gallop have 90 seconds of momentum that nothing short of a physical barrier can fully stop. At 200 meters, the charge breaks, not because Alexander ordered it, because the horses, like the Mongol horses before them, make their own decision about the last 200 meters. Alexander pulls up 200 meters from the American line. He looks at the paratroopers in front of him. They look at him. For 8 seconds, nothing happens. Then Alexander raises his lance, not as a weapon, as a salute. The brigade commander, watching on feed from 800 meters back, says to his XO after a long pause, "Return it." His XO gets on the radio. The nearest American unit raises their weapons in response. Alexander turns and rides back to his line. The battle is over. The final meeting between the brigade commander and Alexander happens that evening. The brigade commander's request this time, not Alexander's. They meet at the same point in the plain where they met that morning. Alexander arrives before the brigade commander and is standing beside Bucephalus when the American vehicle pulls up. The brigade commander gets out. He says, "Why the Cal charge?" Alexander says, "Because you had prepared for everything I had ever done." The commander says, "You could have been destroyed." Alexander says, "Yes." The commander says, "Was it worth it?" Alexander says, "I found out something worth knowing." The commander says, "What?" Alexander says that your weapons can stop anything I do if you know it is coming. But for 90 seconds today you did not know what was coming. And in those 90 seconds, he pauses. Your men looked at 5 horses coming at full speed and they held their position. The commander says, "That's what we train for." Alexander says, "I know." He looks at the brigade commander. He says, "I have fought 20 battles. I have never had a soldier who had to hold position against something that could not be stopped by anything they did before it arrived. Your men did that today." He says, "That is the finest thing I have seen any soldiers do." The brigade commander is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "With respect, sir, your men crossed 800 meters of open ground under Apache fire and kept coming." Alexander says, "Yes." He smiles. He says, "We are both very hard to kill." 5 videos into this series, the answer to the central question has never changed. The US military wins, every time. The technology is too decisive, the precision too absolute, the information advantage too complete for any ancient force to overcome in sustained combat. But Alexander the Great revealed something in 2 days on the Persian plain that none of the previous commanders could, because Alexander is the only commander in the series who studied the US military before the battle began and adjusted his tactics in real time based on what he learned. Genghis Khan adapted after contact. The Roman general adapted after contact. Ivar adapted after contact. Ramesses II charged alone because he was a god. Alexander adapted before contact, during contact, and after contact simultaneously. And on day 3, he did something none of them did. He abandoned everything he knew and did something completely new, because everything he knew had been studied, countered, and prepared for. Oblique attack that is still in the U.S. Army Field Manual today was invented by a 25-year-old king who never lost a battle. On day 3 on the Persian plain, that same king threw his field manual away and charged straight ahead because the only move his enemy hadn't prepared for was the one he'd never made before. The U.S. military has the best weapons in human history. Alexander the Great had the best mind. For 90 seconds on a Persian plain in 331 BC, those two things met at 200 meters and looked at each other. Neither one blinked. Subscribe, because the series isn't over, and the next enemy has been waiting longer than all of them.